Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars rambling video. And for those of you who don't know, while I usually do produce extremely highly polished movie quality content, and I'm just a little bit of self-deprecating humor there, sometimes I do these rambling videos. I've got no script, I just have an idea or a thought that I want to get out there into the universe. Tomorrow, I've got a fun video about Uglies coming out, and then later today, we'll also be doing another episode of Tapcaf Transmissions. We'll be talking specifically about Book 4 of the X-Wing series, The Bacta War. So, if you're not interested in this, consider checking those out instead. Anyway, there's something with the new Star Wars books that have been really bugging me, and this has come to a head with the newest Thrawn book, Thrawn Treason. Now, let me get something out of the way right away. I love Timothy Zahn. I think his contributions to Star Wars cannot be overlooked. He helped save or keep the trilogy healthy for hardcore fans between the original trilogy and Episode 1, with of course the Thrawn trilogy in conjunction with Dark Empire. I think the way he's written Thrawn in the first 3 novels of this new series, I think his writing generally has all been really great. I also think the way that canon has handled Thrawn has also been really great. I appreciated the character in Star Wars Rebels. I thought the way he was defeated at the finale made sense for his character. You can't actually defeat Thrawn if he understands what he's facing. You can only do it with some sort of unexpected twist. That was the exact same way he was in Legends. I like how the new canon has taken the sort of late Legends version of Thrawn, where he's not just a boring Imperial, rather he has greater visions for the galaxy and has loyalties above the Empire and is really a pretty decent dude when it comes down to it. I really like all of that. However, what I don't like is that this new Thrawn trilogy has done basically nothing for the character, and that is not Timothy Zahn's fault. He's very clearly been told, this is where the story starts, this is where the story ends, you can work within that, but nothing can really happen. So let's talk about the 3 books, and when we get to Thrawn Treason, the newest one, I'm going to talk only very vaguely, no major spoilers or anything like that. But notwithstanding the lack of spoilers or major spoilers, I will be talking about the plot, where the story ends and begins generally, so if you're worried and want to go in completely fresh, I will give you guys some warning. So I think near universally, Thrawn 1 is the most well-liked book, because it's got the most mystery and I guess the most room to work with. We know where Thrawn exists in Rebels, but we don't know where he comes from, so that entire side of his character is up for Timothy Zahn to tell. We get lots of interesting stories about how he joined the Imperial Navy, how closely he's still working with the Chiss, his relationship with Eli, and we get a nice little conflict with Night Swan. At that point too, there was still a lot of mystery about the character. We didn't know how closely he would work with Palpatine, and we had references in Star Wars Aftermath to Thrawn helping to plot the unknown regions, and a lot of the details surrounding the First Order were still kind of mysterious. So I think that book had a lot of potential to surprise the reader and even take the story in some interesting directions, even though ultimately we know where he will be in Rebels. However, by the time we got to book 2, things started to get a little problematic, and that is because we know the end point for Thrawn's character, or at least the end point for now. Thrawn is obviously not dead after being blasted away with Ezra. However, there is sort of an artificial limit which puts an end point on where the story can go. Thrawn Alliances is kind of mixed between Thrawn in the past and Thrawn dealing with the new Grisk threat. But by this point, the story is very limited because we know Thrawn has to be at certain places at certain times, we know how he'll interact with the rebels, we know eventually he'll have to be taken away, and we know that nothing major could have happened to alter his character because it's not manifested in Star Wars Rebels. And this is where I'll be moving into Thrawn Treason, so minor story spoilers I guess, even medium range spoilers for those who want to go into clean with the book. So the major problem with Thrawn Alliances is that Thrawn Treason is that it does the same thing as Thrawn Alliances a second time. They're still telling stories which are locked in this time period before Thrawn leaves with Ezra. No part of the book exists after the Rebels season finale, not a single line. What's more, 2 of the major plot lines we basically know the ending of. So there's the Grisk threat, and the Grisk are an alien species from the unknown region who are perhaps invading the galaxy, and there is also the Project Stardust, or the Death Star, versus Thrawn's TIE Defender program. Now, the latter, we know how that ends from Star Wars Rebels, and we know the Grisk can't be a major threat because they never invaded the galaxy. So we've got a story largely centered around 3 things, that being the character of Thrawn, that being the Grisk threat, and the competition between Project Stardust and the TIE Defender program, all of which we know how will end up. So ultimately, the book is still good, there's still lots of fun in there, and I haven't even finished all of it, but I know the major plot points such that I could do this video because I had to decide whether I would speed read the whole thing, as I only got it a day before the release date, or whether I would just do it at my normal pace and continue reading the 3 other books that I'm doing. That's X-Wing number 4, Fate of the Jedi number 7, I think, and yeah, Thrawn. So yeah, there's still lots of good, but ultimately the main problem is that the book is just treading water. Why is this? Well, because Dave Filoni seems to have ultimate control over what is done with Thrawn's character, and I find this to be extremely frustrating. One of the major promises of a new cohesive universe, not, movies and shows and a secondary expanded universe, but one major continuity, was the promise of cohesive storytelling. The books would be worth reading. They wouldn't be just schlock on the side, and I'm not saying that's what Legends was, obviously, but that's sometimes how it feels like it is compared to the new canon. The books are supposed to be major storytelling mediums, just like the comics are, just like video games will be at some point. However, clearly the higher-ups at Lucasfilm haven't decided what will happen with Thrawn in the future. Whether there's a new show which shows what happened to him and Ezra, whether there's a major something else, a video game, who knows? It hasn't been decided. Regardless, it seems like it's not up to Timothy Zahn, and he might not even be involved with making the decisions. It seems like Timothy Zahn was told after it was decided that the character would be brought into Rebels. Compare this with Legends, where Timothy Zahn introduced the character and has 3 books to bring him basically through a complete arc, and although Thrawn's not a protagonist of the Thrawn trilogy, he still does, have an arc, and he expanded on that with other books much later on. Thrawn obviously does have an arc in the new trilogy, and I'm sure what will eventually be a new series, but nothing has really happened to the character, and the most frustrating thing about Thrawn Treason was that it just did not need to be made. It doesn't advance the Star Wars universe in a significant way, and early new canon books did. The Aftermath trilogy has lots of world building, it has a major conflict that it resolves, and it fundamentally changes the universe, even though that was made within the confines of Episode 7 already being a thing. Regardless of what you think of Aftermath, you cannot say that it doesn't tell a story. And in that sense, Aftermath is quite similar to some of the old Legend stories we saw. Since then, however, we've had a bunch of really talented writers giving us books which are essentially just a little bit of background information. The universe starts in one place and it ends essentially the same way. And that is because, despite the promise of a cohesive universe, the movies are obviously still king. And that's probably how it should be. But then why are we releasing, or why is Lucasfilm, I've got nothing to do with it, why is Lucasfilm releasing so many books which just don't do anything? They've taken a time period where they essentially can't make waves. At least not until the sequel trilogy is over. You can't have some massive war between Episode 6 and Episode 7 because, well, why didn't the main characters reference it at all? Why is there no evidence of it? Now, after the full sequel trilogy comes out, they can look at what they can actually fit in there without, things not making any sort of sense, but that's just not possible now. So what should they have done? Well, they probably should have avoided making too many books between Episode 6 and Episode 7. Leave that time period for later. Do a couple of world building stories, but make people excited for them. Make a big Aftermath trilogy and maybe one more. With the other books, just go somewhere else. Go to the Old Republic. Disney wants to branch out and explore other parts of of the universe, well, why not get the hardcore fans on board with a new, maybe Knights of the Old Republic series, then they can eventually bring in the movie. The problem with this, obviously, is that it requires an extreme amount of forethought, and you really have to have the whole universe planned out for a long time in advance, and it has to be a pretty stable plan too. Now, this might be an unfair ask, and it probably is, but instead, we have Thrawn Treason with 3 plot lines that we already know the answer to. Timothy Zahn is a phenomenal writer, and he knows the character better than anyone else. I just really don't like the idea of Thrawn's fate ultimately being up to Dave Filoni because he appeared in Star Wars Rebels. Give Timothy Zahn the character and let him do something with it. Otherwise, just skip Thrawn Treason. It did not need to be made. There's not enough story to be told there between Thrawn alliances and Thrawn Treason. Like, for example, you can basically sum up the flashback sequences between Thrawn and Anakin pretty quickly. Thrawn knew Anakin became Vader, they did some stuff in the Clone Wars, and they figured out that Palpatine was probably making lightsaber-resistant armor. Everything else, I basically forget, because it just wasn't that important. Now, admittedly, this is just a personal preference, but I'm just frustrated by being excited for a book, then realizing that all I have really to look forward to is the way that it gives me new lore and new background information on the universe. And don't get me wrong, I do really appreciate new lore, but I also want a story that takes the character in new, interesting ways. And I know I'm being really negative, and I'm usually not, but I'm just really frustrated. So if we do eventually get a proper Thrawn trilogy or series, then that's fine. These books, totally cool. But my fear is that Thrawn's fate is going to be decided in a TV show where he is simply the antagonist. This may sound weird, but Thrawn is just such an important part of the expanded universe, and I think it would have been great to just get a trilogy where we don't know how it ends. We don't know whether he lives or dies, what happens. We don't know if he's a rebel by the end, if he's still a bad guy, if he runs off into the unknown regions. The entire time we've had this character, his ending has been defined by another piece of media. My hope is that Thrawn somehow survives until, a time period where he can have a story where he is the most important character in the universe, where he's the big bad enemy, or, maybe the big good guy, who knows? Because Thrawn did have books like this in the Star Wars Legends continuity, but the thing was, he also had the Thrawn trilogy. The problem, though, now is that the post-Endor period is defined by the First Order New Republic / Resistance conflict, and I don't think there's room for a Thrawn campaign in the middle. Perhaps he will re-emerge after episode 9, and that is my hope. I don't know how long Chiss can live, how long or what will happen to Thrawn and Ezra. Perhaps they're in some weird suspended animation. I don't know, and honestly, I don't care. You can take the schlockiest reason as long as Thrawn re-emerges after episode 9 and is still a thing. However, if he's just killed or dealt with in whatever TV series he appears in next, and these 3, maybe 4 books are the only ones we get, I think I'll have been extremely disappointed. And ultimately, this is what happens when you tell story by committee. You've got certain things that certain authors can't do. Timothy Zahn can't touch certain aspects of Thrawn's history. He can't tell a full story. He's limited to basically a few weeks, and he's got to somehow make that interesting, despite the fact that he can't fundamentally change the universe, which I think is really the thesis of this entire video. Also, we've got to wait so damn long for these books. I wish one could come out every few months, like they did in the Star Wars Legends era, especially if not a whole lot is going to be happening. Or I just wish they would somehow communicate with us and let us know what's going on, if they could somehow set expectations, but I know that that's not really something that can be accomplished without saying, hey, don't worry, Thrawn's gonna come back later and he'll be a big thing with his own trilogy. I've got high hopes for Project Luminous, which is supposed to be the big multimedia project I hope that it's something like a Legacy of the Force series where a bunch of authors, or Fate of the Jedi or the New Jedi Order, I guess would be the best example, where a bunch of authors come together, make some sort of story bible, planning out what's going to happen, tell a movie style or movie scale story, just have it all planned out and have, maybe associated multimedia works. That's also something that they did with like The Force Unleashed or Shadows of the Empire. I'm just really frustrated with seeing Star Wars books and feeling like I can skip them and I'm not missing a whole lot. Do you guys know what I mean? Does that make sense? Let me know what you guys think of my thoughts down in the comment section. Am I being unreasonable? What did you think of Thrawn Treason? If you have read it, trying to put too many spoilers because certainly there will be people in this video who plan to read it but haven't already. And I just want to say too, I immensely enjoy the books as I'm reading them, which is definitely the most important part. And I know I've been super negative, but I really do enjoy, especially the audiobooks. I've listened so far to all 3 of the Thrawn audiobooks, and it's quite an experience. They've got full sound. Mark Thompson's the narrator, and he's phenomenal. He did I don't think he did many New Jedi Order books, but he did the Thrawn trilogy, the remaster and Legends. He did all of Legacy of the Force, all of Fate of the Jedi, and then all of the other modern Star Wars books where a special narrator wasn't needed. And he's just really, really good. So if you do want to listen to this book, you can use my Audible code, which is audibletrial.com/EckhartsLadder. I'll probably put a link down to that somewhere. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know how you feel about the future of these stories. I think I am optimistic. I'm a little worried, but I'm also optimistic. If they don't do something with Thrawn, I mean, they can't just leave him dangling. And I gotta say, it is actually exciting having Thrawn be a character and not knowing what happens to him. I can't remember not knowing Thrawn's fate, and we do not know right now. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know everything down in the chat. Again, new episode of TapCap Transmissions tonight. We will be discussing book 4 of the X-Wing series, Back to War. Really fun read. Basically what we do is we have a Star Wars Legends book club. Me and my co-host Corey from the YouTube channel Corey Loses and Corey's Datapad, also lead modder on Empire at War, Thrawn's Revenge, funny enough. And we go over the book in detail and we interact with the audience. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link as well down in the description. Anyway, until next time guys, have a great week. I appreciate you guys supporting the channel, being here, talking with me, and everything else. Until next time, may the Force be with you.